ultimately really mystical understanding of
There's
the world.
also something between Ariosto and Tasso, which is the rediscovery of Aristotle's Poetics.
Yes.
And Tasso's deliberate attempt to write an epic that was, I don't know if it would be saying too much to say, purged of its romance elements, because there's plenty of romance.
There is a lot of romance.
But he wanted to compose an epic that was more along standard orthodox Aristotelian lines, at least the way he and his contemporaries understood it.
Yeah.
Because among other things, Ariosto was an extraordinary literary critic, apart from being an author.
Oh, he's by the way, he was a great. You know that he was a professor of mathematics at the University of Ferrara, among
Mathematics,
other things.
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, great. It's like he's extraordinary, and his commentaries on Plato, in Greek, and Plotinus. A student of mine has just been publishing this note. No, you're right that there is this aspect, the retrieval of Aristotle, this idea of giving a unity, not a variety of plots as you have in Ariosto's Labyrinth, but a unified action here, which is the story of the First Crusade, guided by Godefroy de Bouillon, the First Crusade. But there is, and it's true that the discourse of the heroic poem debates Aristotle, Neoplatonic theories of poetry. But the interesting thing is that he retrieves also the mystical theology of the Pseudo-Dionysius, which, by the way, had been translated into Italian by, on the instigation, by Ambrogio Traversari in Florence, upon the instigation of Nicholas of Cusa. Like, I want to give our listeners here today the sense of how entangled the various aspects of the Italian culture, and the sense of a continuity across centuries. There's a sense of fidelity. The so-called Italian Machiavellian unfaithful is really a little false from this standpoint. So there's a great deal of commitment to these issues. And the Pseudo-Dionysius, because you see, the quest of Tasso is for the sepulchre, which is a Baroque emblem in and of itself. But the sepulchre is empty, which for the believer is a sign that the Christ is resurrected. For the unbeliever, it's really the sign that there was nothing in it. So there you go. And the issue for the great challenge for Tasso is, how am I going to explain intellectually this question of the void? And so there is a new theology in him, which is what makes him the theology of the defeat of God, I call it. That the history is always the story of the defeat of the divine.
Is that what you would point to account for this underlying kind of basso continuo of tristesse, or a certain kind of melancholy? I don't know, what would be the word? There's a certain tone of regretfulness in Tasso.
Of course, yes, it's true. There is the sense of man has been abandoned, and yet human beings can find themselves by looking at the mirror. He calls it the image, but you have an image which always implicates the idea of the mirror. And the image, therefore, reveals to you, that's his argument against the iconoclasts, by the way, the image is not something we look at. The image looks at us and reveals us to ourselves. And in that self-revelation that he can find some kind of acquiescence, some kind of peace. But he is the poet of the crucifix, of the crucified. And that's what I mean, the defeat of God. What we know of God is the defeat of God. That's his extraordinary theological argument that places him. I'm sorry to I don't want to be pedantic, because I'm really not a pedant, I don't think. Maybe you're going to say otherwise. I'll give you the last word. But the great theorists that he reads, of course, there are Pigna and all these other guys, Ludovico Dolce, the theorists, the commentators of Aristotle. But the really great theorists of the 16th century are Borromeo, Filippo Neri, Paoletti, Baronius, and Paul. And I think these are the most extraordinarily radical thinkers about aesthetics and theology, about architecture, about the sacred vestments. every detail of the new liturgical life. He is following them. Nonetheless, what he has and I really want to stop because you may have another question for me. What he has in the Jerusalem Liberata, I think, there are two metaphors that run through from the beginning to the end: the theater and the desert, both places of hallucinations, of illusions. The theater, if things vanish, reappear, points of view, and the desert, also the place of mirages, etc. And out of these two central metaphors, within them, actually, you have he weaves this extraordinary poem.
Yeah, I do have one more question about the personage who, for me, is one of the great, if not the greatest, heroines. My favorite heroine is Armida. I mean, how can Tasso create such a powerful, kind of completely unbounded heroine who is so powerful, and she's also not a Christian, and he will find a way to kind of redeem her at the end in the most unorthodox manner imaginable within the context of a heroic Christian poem. It's unbelievable. What do you make of Armida?
Oh, Armida. But see, to me, Armida, you're right that she's the temptress, the seducer, and the redeemer in the same breath. I mean, retrospectively, a lot of my students are reading Beatrice in pretty much the same way as the Cyrene and Beatrice, and the two phases of the same thing. But I think that she, to me, I don't think that there is a poet in Italian letters who understands women as Tasso does. You know, he was abandoned by them. His madness when he was, when Montaigne went to visit him in Ferrara, the madness was, I'm sure he was a little bit of a psychopath, but but he was put there as a kind of jail because he really had fallen in love with the Duke's wife. And they tried to, that you couldn't allow that. You must be crazy. And, but Montaigne...
Even too much for an Italian.
Yeah, that's
court.
Right. And Montaigne loved the idea of this man who had made a scandal of himself. The madness was a way of making a scandal. But anyway, in spite of all this, he understands there are three women in the Jerusalem Liberata, each more seductive and more interesting than the other. Herminia, Clorinda, what a figure, Clorinda, who of course gets killed the way Rodomonte kills Isabella of Galicia in the Orlando Furioso. Here it's Tancredi who kills Clorinda. What a figure, what an extraordinary woman, and who is also a Muslim woman, but the miracle is that she had Christian ancestors, which probably is true for most Muslims anyway. So it's not really a kind of violence on historical reality. And then, of course, the story of Armida. They all belong to the same world, but to me, the great story, and here Freud, I'm throwing these names out not just because, it's, as you know, Orlando Furioso was read by Voltaire. Voltaire would always keep the Orlando Furioso by his bedside, but Freud was a great reader of Tasso. Guys, this is the reason why I mention this. If you really want to be great, read Italian literature, because that seems to be the case. But anyway, the story of Clorinda is a fascinating idea because of the phantasm that the persistent phantasm, she will become in Tancredi's mind. With Armida, gets to be an Italian mama by the end. So also becomes a good Christian wife.
Do you see a genealogy that links Beatrice to Armida throughout these centuries?
I was hinting that my students are trying to push me into that, especially my undergraduates. But professor, is that what how can you have these two women who are not the Cyrene and that Dante is the same dream in Purgatorio 19, first one and then the other? They must be the two. I'll leave it at that. I don't know. I sort of, I suspect it's true, but I won't say it,
Well, I think that you've shown in this hour, Giuseppe, that what I said in my opening remarks, that there's very little that doesn't have something to do with Italian literature has been proven true. So I want to thank you for coming on. We've been speaking with Professor Giuseppe Mazzotta from Yale. He's the Sterling Professor of Humanities of Italian at Yale University, visiting here at Stanford. and we've been talking with him on behalf of Entitled Opinions. My name is Robert Harrison. Please tune in next week. And Giuseppe, thank you again. Next time you're out in Stamford, we'll have you back on to continue.
Thank you, Robbie. I really enjoyed this. That's great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Donzella fuori